have kids and you have other things in your life, great, go all in. But then middle school, I'm saying, it's where it's at. Weekday tournaments, kids who are always.
I know I've been listening to all the high school stuff in that first meeting, all the little things you have to worry about.
Were you in the after-school lab branding? Which is that the one you went to?
No, I mean like in our opening.
Oh.
When she's talking about all the like decisions after you made it in high school.
Oh.
What the kids' GPAs are and all the.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Discussion on advanced policy or progressive versus traditional policy stuff. I'll say that this is what I intended to be much more of a dynamic question and answer. Let's dive into the things that you have questions about. But to do that through a mission statement of what I think is fueling and motivating the behaviors and approaches in varsity level policy debate. Because I think you all have policy debaters, and so you're at least on hopefully the camp of I believe there's something valuable about policy. Most who are like, we'll never do policy, hate that event, it's bad, like there's real venom directed at policy debate because in their minds, it's not debate, and it's cultivating bad skills, and it's, they're less vocal than ever, but it's still there because you walk into a varsity policy debate, and they're speaking at 300 words per minute, right? Or you hear about this policy debate where someone was like, making it about identity and cultural insensitivities are happening. It's like, that is not something I want to expose my kids to. That doesn't sound like communication to me. No, thank you. We'll do student congress. No, thank you, we'll do. My point being, a lot of it comes from, not necessarily ignorance, but certainly a lack of understanding of what's going on and why. And I think you're all educated enough and are all capable coaches enough that if I can convince you about what these three truths, and I put them in quotations because they're not ironclad, they're not necessarily even things I believe as a capital T truth, but they are the truths for policy debate as we see it at that progressive level. And if you're like, I see why they're doing that because I understand that truth, then maybe it'll be easier to just apply our critical thinking skills and our debate coaching abilities to those manifestations. Does that make sense? So I kind of 10 minutes talking about what I think these truths are, and then dive into Q&A and what those specific behaviors might be. So first truth, and I sent this out. No, have I sent this out yet? Doesn't matter, I will send it out. I'll link to, if you weren't here for the novice discussion, I do think
you haven't seen that at all this year yet.
Yeah, novice packet, as well as the discussion I just had last hour on some of the resources, videos that are out there, even the ones that are like novice critique debate, how to spread, right? Like they're novice, but don't think that doesn't mean they're not progressive or that they aren't useful for varsity debaters too. So that's what that is. But three truths. The first one, everything is debatable. I don't know when this switch happened, but it was natural evolution that if you give kids the ability to think from different perspectives, to debate both sides of an issue, that eventually they would debate every side of every issue, even the ones that we think are, already accepted as truth. So debaters want to debate, is global warming real or not, right? They'll want to debate, is economic collapse good or bad? Suddenly there was a development of what people think is bad, and they build their whole case around promoting economic strength and growing our economy, things that intuitively are accepted as good. No, everything is debatable. I bet I can find material that says growing our economy too much will cause overpopulation, will cause a destruction of the environment that will make it unsustainable. We should de-develop to a society back without, right? And you're like, that's a little silly, but it's debatable. And there's a truth that in policy debate, nothing is given, nothing is assumed, nothing is sacred. Everything is up for debate. And what that might look like are, I mentioned that one, impact terms, significant harms terms. What you thought was bad is actually good. You had a whole case about trying to solve global warming. Yeah, I know 95% of the scientific community thinks that global warming is real and bad, but did you know that CO2 actually makes plants grow more, and so if we get more CO2, we get more plant life, which is better, you know.
Which solves for the environment.
Yeah, which will eventually solve. And so I'm like, wait, what? And sometimes kids will walk out around and be like, I have no idea what they were saying. We lost the judge bad, other team bad. It was some kind of cheating thing. They were saying global warming is good. I mean, can you believe that? Right? I'm not saying these are good arguments, but because it's progressive because they're challenging that notion that global warming was always bad.
I know that I judged a lot last year, and some of the best ones I judged were kids that I just went, you really argued that? And they had some awesome evidence to prove it, and I just went, okay.
And you believe in the value of debating that out, and so someone who's a little bit more dogmatic might be like, see, that's why I hate policy. The idea that they would say global warming is good is counterproductive to the educational mission that we have about teaching sustainability. Then debate it out, right? And
Totally disagree.
I disagree too. But that's what I mean. So you have to believe that truth not only is debate good, but everything should be up for debate. So it might be an impact term. It might start to be discussions of theory and what kinds of arguments are allowed in debate. The rules for debate are pretty short. Affirmative speaks first. 8-minute constructives, 5-minute rebuttals, right? But there's not a referee other than the judge. And if the judge believes that everything's up for discussion, up for debate, just like even a judge in a legal courtroom, right? Is that leading? Is that badgering the witness? Is that someone has objected? Is that objection going to be sustained or overruled? That judge might hear arguments on both sides. Where are you going with this? Let's debate this out. Are counterplans allowed in debate? Allowed, right? What kinds of counterplans? Some that might not be very fair, some that might be, but that's up for debate. So these questions of the practices of what should be allowed in debate are settled in the debate. Everything is debatable. Critique arguments come from a sense of maybe even the premise, the assumptions built into the topic and the idea that we need plans and that the federal government should be an actor that micromanages the world should be problematized, should be questioned, should be critically evaluated. Everything's up for debate. So the topic says the United States federal government should, in this case, reduce its arms sales. What is the U.S. federal government?
That was really just bad.
Even more so, what is the United States? Built into the, up for debate is the United States a legitimate entity at all? Or is it a settler state who has occupied native lands, and this debate is on stolen land, and until we reconcile that point, your discussion of arms sales is secondary and assumes the United States is a legitimate actor.
So those are theory arguments or critiques?
Critique. K, capital K, Frankfurt School, German philosopher, critique, to challenge, disrupt. So that's just like the lingo, the K. Even though critique, you can spell with a C, but critical theory. They realize everything's up for debate. If in the academy, in journal articles, right, there's political science, and everyone's like, here's political science, Congress and president and foreign policy, and they're like, actually, our kind of political science is challenging from a more political theory, and not just Aristotle and Rawls' theory. We're going to look at Foucault. We're going to look at gender studies, race studies, and see how that interacts with questions of policy. And it's all up for grabs as possible debate ground, because everything is debatable. Even the idea of wait, I thought policy debate is about plans and policy. That's why the name is there. There's no rule that says you can't disrupt that if you can defend it. The judge believes everything's up for debate. Everything's up for debate. Yeah?
In the actual rules, like I asked Odekirk one time, and
Yeah.
he said the only rule is that speech, order, and time.
Yeah.
So our whole belief system of that the app must have the harm's impact, is true?
No, these are conventions. These are norms. These are, conventions and norms. And like any norm in society, critical theorists want to disrupt and unpack and expose those as norms, not as intrinsic, natural, inevitable things, right? That's the same, simple gender stuff. Do girls have to wear skirts at debate tournaments? Or are they allowed to wear pants? Of course they're allowed to wear pants, right? But there was a time, even
That
still in
wasn't
some
true.
circuits,
Yeah.
where if you wear pants, you might, judge would drop you, or and coaches would say, here's what we expect you to wear. Those would reflect traditions, and they would reflect gender norms. The critique side, everything's up for debate. It shouldn't be that way anymore. But the trophy has a picture of has a figurine of the person wearing it, all up for debate. So again, that's what's fueling this experimentation and exploration into lots of different arguments. That's one thing that we call advanced debate or progressive forms of debate. The other, this belief that the debate round exists for the benefit of the students in the round. It's only for the participants. Oftentimes, when anyone who's not a coach, when they think of debate, what do they think of? They think of either the presidential debates, or they think of gentlemen in Oxford coats and very intelligent, just speaking very poetically but passionately about the issues of our day, and it's for public consumption, right? Parents think they should be able to come into a debate, watch it, be entertained, and have this where they get to decide it, like a TED Talk or something, or a public forum debate. Others might think, it's for me and what I want to accomplish in my curriculum for history or whatever. There are debates that will do that, but policy debate is not designed for public consumption. The goal is not to make them better at communicating an idea to the general public. That's a harder one to get rid of as a coach. But we're teaching public speaking, we're teaching communication skills. True, but audience adaptation and audience-centered communication matters. Policy debate is not the event designed for public consumption. Other events cultivate different values, distinct ones. We talked, what's the purpose of debate? That was why. What's the purpose of impromptu debate? What's the number one skill impromptu debate teaches you? Or one or two?
Quick thinking.
Thinking on your feet.
Quick thinking, and maybe organizing disparate thoughts into a single. Great. If you do impromptu enough, you'll get good at those things. Does it teach research?
No.
Absolutely not. It can't, right? And so I thought debate's about research, and okay, don't judge impromptu with a rubric that it isn't designed to fit. What is oratory? The value. What's that?
It's about
Persuasion.
orating, performance.
Yeah, way more the delivery, right? Writing, composition, which is part of that, but you are judged with your charisma and a little research, but not really. The primary goal of oratory is probably not research, because you're not turning in a research paper, you're turning in a speech. It should reflect some research, but you know what I'm saying? So don't judge oratory on quick thinking. I can give you any argument, you give a speech on it, right? No, I think deeply and thoughtfully about a message, and then I rehearse that, and you're right. Policy debate isn't designed to teach oration skills like oratory, to teach thinking on your feet the same way that impromptu, right? It's not designed to, I think maybe what extent, it may not even be the current events. Extent, if nothing else, you learn current events. Policy may not always be on the current event issue. So what are the skills being developed, the portable skills, I'll say? Because there's the skill that you have in the round at any given moment that you need to have. Flowing, speaking fast, using evidence, whatever. But over time, what do you develop and train yourself? What is cultivated in students that they can take with them when they're done with debate? Right? Imprompters, when they go into the real world, when they're adults, good imprompters are never fazed by change, disruption, or whatever. They're probably pretty good public speakers. They're not going to be too anxious. Right? They can organize their thoughts quickly. Maybe those are some of the things we want. Extempors go on to be very politically literate, current event focused. Policy debaters, what is being cultivated? If not, because it's really not oration sometimes.
I would say it's research depth and the ability to comprehend
Yeah.
very large structures of systems of thought.
I beautifully said. One of the phrases I use is information processing. So depth of research, complexity of thought, processing a tremendous amount of information. That is a skill that whether you're a lawyer, whether you are a graduate student, whether you are a business professional, you're going to be bombarded with information. Can you make sense of that? Can you process that quickly and with depth? And so when a debate round looks 300 words per minute, United States federal government should substantially increase alternative energy, right? Back and forth, and you're like, ew! You're imposing a value set that is not, the policy debate group isn't trying to meet. They're saying if our goal is information processing, then we should have a debate that requires the most information process possible. So let's speed it up. I don't know if you know this, if you've ever done this, but you can watch YouTube videos on, you can change the playback speed, 1.25, 1.5, 2.0. A lot of students these days, just, if you like watch this YouTube video, they'll go in, they'll put it 1.5.
My husband cannot listen to a book unless it's 2.0.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts.
And imagine saying, someone being like, you shouldn't, that's really bad for you because books should be,
Enjoyed and savored.
digested and say, or like, no, if maybe something like poetry, maybe don't go 2.0, but the goal there was to comprehend, process, and acquire more information. And I can do that at 2.0. Great. 2.0 playback speed is one of the things that is happening in policy. The depth of research. So we're talking a lot of cards, a lot of files, a lot of, it isn't just your own ideas. Your ideas have to be tied to quotes in the literature by scholars, and you have to organize all that stuff. So moving further and further away from this is a debate round for external actors and audience members, and it's just for the students. So they've designed a system so they can go that fast, and the judge can hear it, and they can hear it. Wow, it's such a special thing for them. It's like if you went to a science fair, there's a difference between fourth grade science fair, right? Judged by parents or judged by adults, know something, but like the idea is, here's this cool science project that is publicly, if you go to professional conferences of scientists, they don't have they might still have the display board, but it's not here's my thing I'm going to use terminology that only other people in my field know. It's going to assume a baseline understanding of expertise that you already have, because I'm being judged by other PhD scientists on my work. And if someone walked in and is like, hey, let's go to this science fair, it'll be like our Saturday activity, and you go around like, that was so dumb, and it was like, so dense, egghead stuff, it wasn't even like cool science, right? They don't even know how to speak to the general public when they ask. I had a question about, right, it's not for you, it's for the scientists. This is for the policymakers. Last one, and you can see how some of these overlap, but the belief that hard debate is good debate. That there's a time and place for spar, and I think that place is dinner parties or something. There's a time and place for, I saw this card game this summer
Super
first time. Super Fight.
Super Fight. We use it in class.
Yeah, you don't know about Super Fight? It's card. You basically, there's different versions of it, but you get a character, the other person gets a character, and then so there's white cards, you pick a random character, and then these black cards, I think that, modifications, whether it's a adjective or whether it's an object that they have, and then you debate who would win in a fight, right? And each one is different matches, like who would win in a fight, Mickey Mouse or Cat Lady with 12 cats, or Iron Man, bizarre stuff, It's fun. It's a game. It wasn't made by debate. Well, it may have been made by a debater, but it wasn't designed to be a competitive event. It was designed to people socialize, right, and have a good time. So there's a time and place for spar, but I don't think spar is valuable. That's going to be my hot take, right? That I don't think it should be a competitive event. I think it's good for in-classroom exercises. I think it's good as like possible means to another end. But if you said a student should be a spar debater their whole year, they're on the debate team as the spar specialist, it's insulting to say that person is doing the work and gaining the benefits of debate as one of our LDers or one of our policy debaters in public forum.
Is it an event at high school?
Yeah,
And it's
not a state event.
not a region or state, but it is at 1A and 2A, I think.
Oh, it still might, yeah, because they don't do
Yeah.
policy, yeah.
Yeah.
And part of that, and to be fair, I understand it as well. Like, if you're a 1A school and you got 80 kids in the building, so 6 on your team, doing policy really is probably not the best bang for your buck. The amount of time and energy and resources that goes into a policy team for what you have, right? It'd be hard. So I get that. So it's not a judgment on that, but it is a judgment on which one of those is more rigorous, right? No one can say SPAR is more rigorous, even if they can say somehow that's more valuable. So this belief that hard debate is good debate, we should challenge kids to test their limits. The more rigorous an activity, the more valuable it is. And so again, debate should reflect that amount of rigor. That means more evidence, that means the speed, it means the complexity and diversity of arguments, it means metacognition or meta thinking and debating about debate itself, like what is the value of debate and why are we doing it, what's the role of the judge, So you might hear that in debate. One team will get up and read their plan, they'll be like, this is a good idea, you should vote for it because the US federal government should reduce arms sales to Saudi Arabia. And the reasons they said we should reduce to Saudi Arabia are, let's say it's because Saudi Arabia has misused their weapons and have caused human rights abuses with their weapons. So we're going to take away those particular weapons. The other team might get up and say, I have a critique argument about the very nature of militarism. That militarism is not a particular set of technology, like particular set of weapons. That it's not a particular abuse of those weapons. It is a structure that permeates our culture. From violent video games to school shootings to the military-industrial complex to everything is militaristic. And we think that the affirmative has only focused on the bad weapon, but left intact the justification for the rest of the military. Like Saudi Arabia, we should sell Saudi Arabia arms if they had used them correctly. Our critique says they can never be used correctly. The military-industrial complex must end. And that's our critique argument. We're going to go one step further. We think we're going to take you out of Plato's cave for a second. You are not a policymaker. You are not the federal government, and whether you vote affirmative or negative will have a zero impact on whether those arms are reduced to Saudi Arabia. You are an adult. You are an educator. You are a critical thinker. We are just students. We are all just here in a room in a high school thinking about the world. And we want you, the judge, to not render a decision based on whether their policy is a good idea, but whether who brought the best ethical or best knowledge produced to create activists for the future.
The best education in the round.
Best education in the round, but education for critical activism in the future. If we've won that we need to start training this generation, us, my 16-year-old self, right, to have the skills and the awareness to take down the military-industrial complex. To take down, we need to start training now. That's a bad form of training.
Can I
To
ask you a
pretend you're the
question about
federal
an
government.
argument that was made in a round and,
Yeah.
and get your opinion? So,
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Because that is the last truth. I mean, I linked some other things for other resources, but yeah.
so the example this morning of you can't tell the white male that he doesn't have a voice in the round, it's that round.
Yeah?
And they were doing identity, whatever.
Yeah.
And he came in and said, if education is the point, then why aren't you in an oratory round where 13 people are going to be listening to you instead of in this round where four people are listening to you?
Yeah.
Is that a valid...
Everything's debatable. That
I was
argument
going to say,
counts.
what do you personally think about that argument?
So, in the back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I would do if I was that team. So I don't get to say like that's a good argument, but on it. The response to that, the reason I don't think it would win you the debate is if we go back to what the value of policy debate offers, what makes debate different from oratory.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. Going to oratory and doing that would maybe have more of an audience impact. But we're trying to do theoretical thinking that tackles the complex issues of the day, like identity. Oratory will not test us. In the sense of no one's going to counter our position, and we're not going to have to confront anyone's position either. It would just be a TED Talk where I say cultural competency matters, and people are like, oh, cool, right? That the value of policy is rigorous research, rigorous testing of ideas, and
that means that opposing team has to be open to criticism, which they clearly weren't by their...
But that should be their argument. If you're not open to criticism,
right.
And we've made an argument that, like, for this race argument, part of it, this isn't even like super critical theory. Professional development conferences on cultural competencies and stuff will say how it's hard to talk about race, right? And it's particularly hard when it's hard to talk about race because people get either defensive or it's like there's a you feel accused or but not talking about race maintains institutional racism, right?
It was such a frustrating round because there were two girls
Yeah.
who were not any POC of any kind, and in the round was my white guy and a card-carrying Native American.
Yeah.
And they were part of what their identity stuff was colonialism, and it was just like, do you realize?
I think those are.
Whoa.
You're now on this a better argument than you should go do this in oratory, and instead, all right, let's have this discussion. Like it'd be the difference if your administrator at the faculty meeting is like, we need to talk about implicit bias, cultural competencies, and the way, like, we don't have like different schools. But if you're like, we don't have any. Look around, we don't have any people of color on staff. We have no African American teachers. What about our students? Our black students who don't see themselves on this, like, let's talk about it. If someone's like, whoa, come on, I'm here to teach history, I'm here to teach English, let's keep race out of it. I'm not ready for this criticism. That leader there who's ever is like, this is kind of the point. You can't stick your head in the sand and say race doesn't matter. It matters to those students of color who don't feel like they have an affinity group or someone who they trust the same way, right? Alternatively, right, versus you're starting to say, what if I could engage it and say, it's kind of weird that you as two white students are bringing up a discussion of identity, using this argument to do damage to a person of color, like a native, like...
And shut down a white
at,
male. You're doing two horrible things at the same time.
Yeah, and so...
It was just like, whoa.
But the idea is that, ideally, that would be a positive... ultimately, even though they're debating back and forth, a moment of discovery that wouldn't happen if not for the critique. All of this, I'll say disclaimer, from the speed to the jargon to the critical theory, can all look really good or really, really bad. And that's true of any, it's like, before we really micromanage Congress and the bills, right? If you saw some of these Congress sessions, what the bill students would propose, and how from inappropriate to offensive they were. It's been like 4 years since we've made the Congress community. Remember any of those? I mean, horrible stuff. Racist, sexist, homophobic stuff. It's like because the students could just bring up anything and have it, right? My point is, so be like Congress can look really good and sophisticated. It can also look like a circus. Hard debate is good debate, and it's for the students, and we're trying to information process. So I can show you some videos of people talking 300 words per minute, where you can actually understand it. and you can feel the passion and feel the articulation, and they are communicating just really, really fast. And I can show you videos of sophomores and juniors in high school who, right? And you're like, okay, you're trying to do that, but it's not working. Don't judge it based on that. So in that round, right? Try not to say that's a reason why identity critiques are bad, and maybe why that team poorly executed it and maybe didn't do their homework enough to make a good argument.
My kids' arguments were really good, and they lost the round, and it was, if they'd have won it, they'd have gone to nationals. So I was a little peeved.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, and I don't know the judge, I don't know what was said exactly. The idea is it's frustrating because that's not something that we have prepared our students for. We've prepared them, most of us, for the traditional norms and codes and expectations that we had, and that still, for the most part, the majority have. And so when confronted with this new argument, it's like, wow, we shouldn't have to debate that. It's hard. And some of the arguments that students come up with in the moment are intuitive and initially pretty good, but those are because they're the most common intuitive answers, and it's only the first time they've had to do it. That team that's read that critique, that argument, that's not the first time they did that. They've had that same interaction maybe a dozen times. And so they were ready for the go-do oratory, or they were ready for the this is policy debate. Well, actually, and they might sound a little bit more sophisticated or have a little bit more backing because they have heard the argument before. So, but again, that's what's animating progressive debate is for better or worse. I say it's a truth not because it's a commandment, but deep down the assumption, the implicit understanding for those progressive judges who would allow for these kinds of debates are, nope, everything is debatable, everything's on the table. As long as the students are driving the discussion and trying to get something out of it that they think is valuable, that's all I'm going to say. And every time you say, no, we should limit it, or whoa, we aren't prepared for that. No, hard debate is good debate. Make kids go back to the drawing board and read and do more. And that again, all those are contestable because, especially the hard debate is good debate and everything's debatable. There is very few limits in policy debate. And in our age of high school demands, more than ever, college applications and jobs and AP classes and tech, and social anxiety, we need you to dedicate 20 hours a week to learning about critical theory, confronting your own racial identity, to keeping up at current events, doing a lot of speaking drills. It's like, it can be too much. But progressive policy debate has said, we're going all in on those truths. So keep pushing. Other questions, other things, like when you signed up for it, what did you want covered? I can go more into critique arguments. I can give some examples of theory.
How do you help parents judge this? Because I know I judged this a couple times a few years ago, and I just went, that's the argument I understood, and that's the one that won.
Great. That's how you judge it.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean,
sometimes I just looked at it and went, I had no clue what you said, and I understood exactly a couple words that you said, and that's the one that won. And that, looking at it with the theory, with everything is debatable and the theories and the impacts, it sounds like the kids put a lot more effort into it than just I understood that one.
And it's a two-way street. We call this progressive maybe, because it's not just like varsity or advanced. Like it's not like they have to be trained for that. I've hinted at it a few times with if the judge is progressive, this is what the debate will look like. Audience adaptation and judge adaptation is still at the heart of every event we do. And it's a two-way street. I would encourage, if it was a parent who was going to judge regularly, to try and do those training videos, watch other rounds, ask questions, try and be the best judge they can. But it would be also educating the students the importance of knowing your audience and adapting to their needs. And that's something that they don't get without sometimes heavy-handed explicit approaches where you have a good varsity team, that has all the reputation, and they went to camp, they have all these files, and they talk really fast. And I think that's what makes them good. And there is possible value in it, at times, but they need to be able to say, all right, we have a judge who is not comfortable with speed. And so I would train them, I would do two things. Train your parents to, one, assure them that how they judge the round is how they should judge the round. It's their, and to not listen to the rumors, or sometimes you hear the complaints, or judges or students who sometimes say you're like the parent judge, or they were bad. Don't listen to them. They're bad students. You're doing what you should, right? It's not their job to adapt to you. And then I would encourage them to be transparent about that. To not wait for a student to say, what do you want to hear? We call them paradigms, or philosophies, or experience, where you tell them that they should, at the start, before the round begins. So before the round begins, just a little bit about myself. I'm a parent volunteering here with Hillcrest, and I want to, I did judge Congress last weekend. It's the first time in policy.
You need to be able to understand what you're saying.
And that could be just that. If they then know that means I need you to slow down, they should say that. If that means I really don't appreciate critique arguments in debate, they should say, it's like, the more transparent they are, then it's on. If the kid ignores that, then they should lose.
So last year I was at Warren's tournament, with Bingham's, whatever that one.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I had my online paradigm, and I watched the round ended, and I said, it's 100% obvious to me that this team read my paradigm and this team didn't, because you did everything I don't like. They win, I'm done, and walked out.
That's your job, right? That's the idea. Just like it's your job as a teacher, if you're like, all right, passing back the papers, this stack, the students clearly read the instructions. They're going to pass. You all didn't. You did the exact opposite of what I asked you to do. So, what I'm not, maybe there's some good stuff in here. I asked you to do one thing, you did the opposite, right? Totally fine. So, still everything's up for debate, and I respect so much our parents are willing to do that. And I know some of them they show up to judge, and then someone's like policy, and they're like, what is that?
And then they go in and come out and go, what was that?
Yeah, and I sympathize with them, because they do, because they're parents, they do pick up and see, wow, these kids put a lot into it. They care a lot. I don't want to let them down, right? It's a two-way street. All you can do is try and be objective, try and be transparent, work as hard as you can. But there's not you shouldn't be seeing identity clashing debates at 300 words per minute on questions of whether the United States should exist or not. Because it's like that they.
I don't know.
I would say tell a parent if that happens, do your best. They're trying, they do something. You're still gonna have to decide who won and lost. You might decide on a metric that they weren't expecting, but be open-minded. Do your best.
Same tournament, kids walked in. The judge says, "Can I get the sense you guys don't want to talk about this topic?" And they said, "Yeah." So they debated on whether or not my student should dye his hair purple, and that's what the round was. Policies you never know what you're gonna get.
Yeah, everything, and the best debaters, everything is debatable. So it sounds like we don't want to debate the topic. We want to debate whether hair. They would hopefully have the skills now to say that debate is not rigorous, helpful for information. It's a less valuable form of debate. So the fact that you're proposing that is the reason you should lose.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Just on the topic of new or less experienced policy debate judges, there's kind of two tips that I like to give those judges or give people in general. One, if you can, bring a laptop that has a USB drive. That way the competitors can flash the case to the judge. That way they don't even really need to necessarily hear all the arguments, because the verbal part of policy is almost just kind of a way to bring in the amount of information we can use. So if you could read it during the time, then it's in, regardless of how intelligible it is sometimes. So that should make it easier for a judge to just kind of read through this and kind of get a general idea of what's going on. And then the other one is, if they are, listening to the speech and they're interested in that, they can always say, hey, during this round, if you're going a little fast, I'm going to say clear, or I'll say slow down, just like while you're speaking, and the debaters will usually, take that and go, okay, I need to, enunciate more, I need to slow down a little bit because they're not getting what I'm saying. More experienced teams will literally watch a judge as they're flowing. If they're not flowing something, like, hey, slow down a little bit. But a lot of younger teams or less experienced on like the national circuit kind of need that clear or that verbal response back during a speech, and that can be really helpful for a judge who wants to, actually judge what's going on and give the kids, the credit for all the work they're doing.
I think well said, and I think that's especially true for those. We sometimes make it too binary: experienced judge or inexperienced judge. There's levels of that, so. That would be a big ask for any first-time parent, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes we're like, I judge public forum all the time. I don't like policy because there's just that. I know how to flow. I know what cost-benefit analysis is. I know what evidence is. You're actually pretty experienced. There's just a few barriers like the speed, and so great, like for an intermediate judge especially, I think, to be able to be like, oh wait, I can say things like clear, slow, like I can give some prompting, just like I give time signals. To say, nope, that was too fast. I asked you to slow down a little bit. You didn't slow down enough. But instead of waiting until the debate is over to say that as your reason for decision, to be comfortable with saying, clear, no, slow down still, right? And it's like, whoa, yeah, you can say that. Because then if they're like, slow down, that's still too fast. And they're like, you're like, okay, I asked you, now I can act, and that's what I mean by the transparent piece. It's, everyone walks away feeling angry if the judge doesn't say anything. They had to sit in the chair for an hour and a half, being miserable because no one's doing debate the way they want. And then they vote on something that upsets the kids because they didn't know. And they should. It's like you can pass the blame around. If you're like, I've never done this before, I don't know what that means, but you should know I've never done this before. We have to train our kids to know how to adapt. Similar, like if you know it's too fast, be transparent and say this is still too fast. If they ignore it, it's their own fault. If you never said it, how can they know? Good point.
I do say that up front though. I say, look, if you're going to spread, you can spread if I can't understand you.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I can't judge debate at that point. I'm just judging speaking skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done that too.
Did you make eye contact? Did you do this? That's really all I could do at that point because I understood nothing. And so usually they're like, oh, okay, can you let me know if I'm going too fast?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it's their job to adjust to you because you are the judge.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not doing a disservice at all. Like, I know there's a little bit of like, oh, I feel like I'm not as capable to judge as no. Even though I said there are certain values, that are unique to policy that they're trying to cultivate information processing. Impromptu is a valuable event. Oratory is a valuable event. Extemp is a valuable event. And so even if you came in as an oratory judge, the policy debaters may feel like in their own 16-year-old heads, this sucks because we don't have a high, experienced policy judge. But we know as educators that every kid should try and give an oratory speech. Every kid should try and do an extemp speech. And like those are good skills. They can't master them all. But so even if it's just for one round, you're like, I'm going to judge you only on speaking skills. Not going to listen to the evidence. Not going to. You may be like, you debate whether that's the best.
It's debatable. I can do what I want.
Yeah. I just think like, as I don't think. I mean,
No, but-
if it costs you a round, I'd be like, oh, be ready to
then-
beat this team in policy versus policy. But long term, those kids are going to try their best to show off good speaking skills, and so be it.
So for the way you did it, like, yeah, if that's the argument you understood because the other team was going so fast you couldn't understand them, then that's a valid way to judge it because you couldn't understand anything else.
Mm.
How can you judge at that point?
Right.
Right? So you know, the way you did it is, and that's what I tell my parents too. It's like, look, if you tell them up front, don't do this, and then that's what they do. You gave them clear parameters at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like every teenager who doesn't follow directions.
And what I always tell the judges too at the beginning is because the kids will say, what's your judging experience? And if you're a lay judge, that's what I call my lay judges, and I do not want my students to call them mom judges. Because I said, excuse me, your mom is the best judge of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you have the lay judge, but the thing is, so what I say is all the time, it's my judging experience. I'm a parent, I win 100% of my arguments, so, and that kind of loosens them up a little bit too, but then they understand that, look, you're a lay judge, and they know that they need to adapt. And my policy debaters, I make sure like you can spread for the if they have policy experience, go for it. And one of them you can't even understand that it's English. It just sounds like music kind of after a while. Doesn't sound like words. Yeah, but then they have a lay judge. They know they have to slow it down.
Do they write two different cases in case they have to slow down?
No, but they
Yeah, sometimes.
I'll never make it through this if I get a lay judge and have to slow down. So
Yeah.
I have a backup.
So I think it's really important to. There's nothing wrong with being a less experienced judge in policy, because I really like this idea of information processing. It's a very succinct way to communicate kind of what policy is all about. And a really big part and important part to understanding something is being able to put it out in layman's terms, being able to communicate it in a very simple way. That really is a testament to how well somebody might understand something, to be able to hit it on different levels of experience. So if you do have a less experienced judge, or you have kids who are talking about like, this judge didn't know anything, or mom, or nip the mom part of the butt, definitely. I like less experienced or more experienced judge. I don't like the binary of lay versus collegiate debater. But say, if you can't communicate, your hedge good argument, maybe you don't really understand like hegemony, and you need to like kind of go back to like your problems with Chomsky, or like your problems with like this part of this like very specific complex system. And if you don't understand it, maybe you shouldn't be running that argument to begin with, because maybe you're just regurgitating what you found out in open evidence.
Yeah, it's like they say that you can't, even for students, you don't really know the material until you can teach it, right? And it's just like you may have like, no, I read it, I get it. Like you can't communicate that, you don't really have it yet. And so yeah, it does mean educating. It means educating the students and being willing to say go back to the drawing board, or the critique arguments. If they're like they didn't get my theory of neoliberal capitalism and how it operates for materialism, and well. If you're trying to change the world, who are the people you have to communicate this theory to? People living in that system that you want to disrupt. So it's you can always push it back on them of this is the skill that you need to be able to have and communicate clearly, or communicate it in layman's terms. Just so you know, I'll email this out there, but just there really are some good videos on critique and theory. There's some. This is like all the different evidence files that were produced at camps, including critique arguments. You can see just how limitless there is.
Go fight Wayne.
I'll just click on this real quick. Those of you who weren't here for that. The links to the packet, what some of the arguments were, all the policy stuff you can do. All right, anything else?
How do we deal with? It seems there's a philosophical disconnect in that. Yes, this is not for any consumer, but yet we keep putting any consumer in front of them.
Yeah. I'll just say that part of that is this talk was not supposed to be this is where policy debate should go, or that it's the best version of it necessarily. It's progressive, meaning it's distinct from the traditional format, but both still exist. And they have to adapt to either. So my point is, what was pushing this separation, this kind of progressive shift, were those truths, but not necessarily that philosophically everyone has to be on board with only that. So there's a time and place still for the non-progressive judge.
Do you let your novices run Ks?
No. Well, one, remember the novice package.
Well,
forbids
okay.
Ks. But
What-
even
starting January. do
Yeah,
you-
no. I don't, because it's, I was saying this as people are coming in, it's graduate level reading. And
How many policy teams do you typically run a year?
in across the board, I usually have,
In just high school, not that you.
yeah, but I mean, like, I usually have 2 or 3 novice teams,
Mhm.
2 or 3
JV-ish.
and
2 or 3 of the others. So
2 or 3
10-ish.
varsity. Yeah.
Of your 10-ish teams, how many typically run Ks?
By the time they're in varsity, what will happen, and to speak to you, there are 2 different ideologies. There will be teams that identify as a critique team. They only read critiques.
Half and neg both.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean they give up on the topic, but they might read the more human rights. Like they might say, Israel is a settler state that has occupied territory that is not theirs, and we need to cut off our arms as a symbolic gesture to say Zionism is not good. As our critique argument on the affirmative. Topical, but definitely different.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, but then I have teams who are like, we philosophically hate the K. We think we've had too many bags. We think this is the wrong direction, and we, as a matter of principle, not read a critique. They'd be allowed to on a
Right.
but they've started to identify with one of the 2 camps.
Are they as successful
And then we
on
have
the circuit you compete at?
The years, yeah, oh yeah. But I've had both. Well, the idea being, again, everything's up for debate. If you are willing to put your ideas to rigorous testing, go for it. And part of that is then discovering what you believe and willing to back that up. So, and that will mean at tournaments, if you're an all-policy team, you still better know how to answer critiques in the event that you have a critique judge. Critique judge the critique team probably needs to know how, like they know their preference and they know what they're trying to force in any given debate,
But they
they
still
also
need how to
still
do
have,
it.
have to adapt. And so those will always exist, even at the experience level. So let's say we threw this all out of it's because it's not progressive means experienced, traditional means inexperienced. You have college programs at some schools that hate the K, will not teach it, won't run it, none of their coaches will speak to it, and it's just we are going to keep doing policy debate the way we think it should be debated. And we have reasons to back that up. We've thought about all the defenses of that. And you have others who also college level coaches and college programs who are the exact opposite and saying policy debating to look at itself in the mirror and have some tough conversations about race or gender, about speed, about like all these different things. So it's not about experience. It's just 2 philosophical differences and ideological. What'd you say? Separation.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It leaves my head 2 seconds after it comes out.
Yeah. So I think you can have success at any of them if what you are debating reflects, like I said, the rigorous thinking, the preparation, able to answer the questions about what you got. If it is just pulling up a random file from online and saying this looks cool and it sounds sophisticated and edgy, so I'll just read this. It might win around, sometimes, but a good team, an anti-K good team, will destroy a team that's like, well, we want to talk about hyper-fast, toxic masculinity in a context of globalization. And define any one of those words. Well, it's but
Actually, sorry, I gave you on that one.
But just like the opposite could be true. There could be a traditional team that just you're a little stuck in your ways. You haven't thought about why you're doing this.
Well, so if I'm a traditional team coming up against a progressive team,
Are you traditional because you haven't exposed yourself to
Oh no,
progressive?
my kids very well know.
A traditional because
Well,
it's a choice.
They're no longer my kids.
Well, not
so-
you know what I mean, but like, is it because you haven't, not you, but like, is it they don't understand progressive or they haven't figured out what it is, even if they've had rounds, or is it no, they know what it is and have decided through internal reflection and argumentation that that is not desirable form of debate? Because if they have done that second piece, they have arguments to defeat why.
Well, which is kind of where I was going. I think the arguments that they've tried to use, which is why I think they're failing, but then I'm like, but I don't know what to tell them, is that they try to say that there are those rules of there should be inherency, solvency, da 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 da, when those aren't there. So, I mean, I guess it's a matter of framing the education, which is a more, because, I mean, 3 years ago, I hated the education argument. Like, I didn't want